Hi, Namaskar, everybody. We're just waiting for the stalwart to join us. We have sent the request. Yeah, there. Bickram Ghosh ji, Namaskar.
नमस्कार।
Ganesh Kumar, आप कैसे हैं?
आप कैसे हैं? Good to see you.
एकदम बढ़िया. It's a pleasure seeing you. But before we start the chat,
Yes.
I want to make some introductory remarks so that the people following us would exactly know what's happening.
Sure.
I've been mentioning that InSync is the only television in the country dedicated to classical music and dance forms. And today is being viewed by more than 30 million viewers all over the country because we have no language. So it's Hindustani, Carnatic, Sufi, Ghazal, Fusion, Live, all kinds of engagements. And it was a recent initiative that we wanted to go on to a digital platform as well. And we launched on Instagram Live. And this is possibly the 11th or the 12th week or the 12th episode that we are interviewing a large stalwart. We started with Aruna Sairam, one of the leading names in the Carnatic fraternity. We had Rajesh Bandlin, we had last week Pandit Bickram Ghosh. And today we have a person who is very special to me for many reasons. Classical music is something that is considered to be very pure and with tremendous amount of sanctity. But there have been instances in the past that this pure form of Indian classical music is carried to the foreign lands and extremely successfully. It demystified Indian music, and suddenly you realize that there is a lot of people interested in genuine music who have started following Indian classic music, and that was Pandit Ravi Shankar. Now, there was a debate then whether it is necessary or not necessary, whether Indian classical music should stay within this country, within the conservative traditional audience, or is it something that needs to be exposed to a modern world? And in that journey, ultimately, the time proved itself, and people started realizing that there is a fundamental need for our conservative Indian classical music tradition to be demystified and taken to the modern world, especially to the youngsters, especially to the younger generation, which has a fundamental liking for music. And this is not just an exceptional thing. This is something that needs to happen. And in that journey, friends, there was another young mind which followed the same path as Pandit Ravi Shankar ji, and that is Pandit Bickram Ghosh. Now, having said that, Bickram ji, you have not restricted yourself to the Indian classical music while you are fairly deeply engrossed in promotion of Indian classical music, but you have been successfully trying out various other experiments. And if I may qualify you as a thinking musician who is not wanting to stay within a small shell, but wants to reinvent himself on a daily basis. So your initial remarks, and then we will go on to your childhood. Over to you.
Ganeshji, that was very well spoken. You really have encapsulated the entire process beautifully, and of course I really admire the fact that InSync is dedicated to Indian music in the way that it is, because it is very important, especially for the youth, to understand that this is a form which is absolutely brilliant. There is nothing like this in the entire world. And if the youth, especially of our country, stay bereaved of this beautiful culture, then they will be losing out on a large part of their identity, which is one of the most beautiful things in the world. Yes. Coming back to myself and what you spoke about me, that too is absolutely correct and spot on. You see, of course, I started very early. My career started very early because in my house, my parents were both musicians. My father, Pandit Shankar Ghosh, one of the great tabla players of all time. My mother, a very well-known singer of the Patiala Gharana. I grew up in an atmosphere of intense classical music. And interestingly, because when I was 1 year old, I was taken to America, where both my parents were teaching at the Aligbur College of Music. And I came back when I was almost 6 years old. So that period, growing up in the US, coming back, studying in a school like La Martiniere for Boys in Calcutta, where there was no classical music, absolute, literally zero. It was a very westernized institution. then going to St. Xavier's College and Jadavpur University, doing a master's in literature. So I had a very my life was had different trajectories right from the beginning. At home was this very strict classical world where my father would wake me up at 5 a.m. in the morning and tell me you have to practice before the 6:30 bus comes to take you to school. So that juxtaposed against this very westernized schooling was where we even had a band in school called the Satellites. We were doing covers of Rolling Stones and what have you, and I was playing conga, much to the disappointment of my father, who was like, "Riyaz karo, ye bajao." So interestingly, when I here and subsequently entered the realm of one of the greatest musicians of all time, which is Pandit with whom I played for 12 years, quite fast, because I was in my mid-20s. He literally picked me up, and one of the reasons he picked me up was because of course I had my father's talim, and also because I was trained in Carnatic music also. I've had thorough training in both the forms, percussion forms, of course. I mean, so I learned from Pandit S. Shekharji in Calcutta, was a great Mridangam Vidwan. And right from the early days, the early 90s or late 80s, when I started traveling, I was playing with some of the stalwarts in Carnatic music, including Balamudi ji, including, we were doing a trio of sorts with Karekuri Mani ji and Harishankar ji on Kanjira in the 90s. And so a lot of exposure there and understanding that form. So when I was playing with Raviji early days, he was very intrigued by how the math in my mind was working, because he felt this is different. So that came quickly and it was fantastic. I mean, I never imagined I would be playing with Pandit Ravi Shankar ji. I mean, I remember getting really badly stung by somebody's elbow in my rib cage in the mid-80s when I tried to go and get an autograph from him. I couldn't get the autograph. There was so much crowd around him around 1885, and I was very young, and I got a poke in my chest. Later on, I told Guruji, Jathamoshai, like in Bangla we used to call him, that this is what happened. And he said, "So look at life. Huh? Now you're playing with me, and you're playing." I ended up maybe, I don't know, 800, 900, 1,000 concerts with him. So there from, now see, you have to understand that I had a very strange upbringing. So as in school all of this was going on, we were listening to Western classical music, we were listening to jazz, we were listening to all of this. At home I developed a very, very strong liking for Pancham Das music, Adi Burman and Madan Mohan, and that whole beautiful structure of music which was there then in Bollywood. And then by the time I was playing classical music, pure classical music, which was the first 12 years of my life, I did nothing. There was no, I started Rhythmscape, which was my first fusion act. I think I must have been about 35 years old by then. So that was much later. So I was playing professionally from my late teens. So I was already entrenched in classical music and I loved it. And so thereafter it began, and when that began, now I know you will go into the next question, but that was in that direction.
I'm not intending to go to the next question, which is going to be very platform oriented. I want you to stay back in your childhood for some more time. Sure. Because as you yourself mentioned, you had a very interesting mix of people around you. You had your mother who was a singer, you had a father who was playing tabla, you had interactions with the Mridangam Vidwans, you had interaction with all the performing musicians, but yet you also had to go to school.
Yes.
And I'm sure the school journey would have been filled with, if you have got up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do riyaz, maybe you felt like taking a little nap when you were in the interval. Now that journey, see, I'll tell you, the purpose of this Instagram live is not so much to bring out the classical music, but the life journey of the stalwarts as to how they lived, how they spent their childhood. Did they also play pranks? Were they also beaten up? Were they mischievous? And how did they manage to do so many things in their childhood? And Bickramji, I want you to say a little more. How was your childhood? Was it always challenges, or did you really enjoy? Did you play? How did it happen?
actually, I really had an amazing childhood. I had an amazing childhood, which is why I think my life today is very rich because of the. Uh, I like using the English language because I studied literature. My childhood was myriad. It had all of hues because, as I said, growing up in the U.S. in the West Coast in that late 60s and very early 70s, we came back in 72, and the influence then primarily of a young school-going boy who was going to kindergarten, nursery, kindergarten in America. Let's remember we had 24-hour television then. We had television. So I was growing up watching Sesame Street. I was watching Walt Disney, Speed Racer, that, you know. And then my father, now this is a really interesting thing. Suddenly he announced, we are going back. She said, good life, you know. My father said, my son has started calling me dad. So he said, if you're calling me dad now, he has not. And my father sacrificed so much in his life to play tabla, and then of course, and those days Ali Khan Sahab and Baba there are videos of them traveling in helicopters to concerts. I mean, the glamour of it was unbelievable, you know. And the Grateful Dead were my father's students, so these huge rock bands. And so I remember, you know, going to they had stallions and stuff. So I was a kid then. So suddenly he comes back to Calcutta, India, and those were the days of load shedding in India. It was dark, and you know, you had to use a lantern often to study, and so it was a huge culture shock for me. So there was no television at all. 1974, I think TV came, that too for 2 hours in the evening. So that period was a very formative period for me. So I couldn't speak Bengali very well, and I was a bit kind of ostracized because I was too Americanized and all of that. But the interesting part was, when I started with Lamatya, I found a milieu where I could kind of, you know, they spoke in English and that was there, so I had a comfort zone. But the contrast at home was so much, because here all the other, you know, you touch people's feet, those great artists, and everybody was coming to the house. One day Ravi Shankar ji would come to the house, one day Ali Khan Sahab would come, another day Vilat Khan Sahab would come. They're all Baba's colleagues and all these people, and then in school we are doing Rolling Stones and Beatles and Bee Gees, you know. So it was such a contrast, and I was studying English literature eventually, which I loved, I still love, and I read a lot. And my childhood was, I think that's where the whole activity post age 35 came. That the fusion work, the collaborative work, because a part of my brain had also assimilated all that information along with all of this. And I keep telling my kids today that, look, you don't need to choose. You don't have to be, okay, I'll do classical only, or I'll do only music, or I'll do only studies. No, human brain is so humongous, it can assimilate everything. And we did that. So I think that's the part of my childhood which has really been formative for me, who I became later on.
Now, when you shifted as a child from US to Calcutta, and in your own words, it was all very dark, they were using lanterns, and there was a lot of shortage for everything in India. Those were the difficult days when the middle class families found it very difficult to earn a living. But despite that, there was a tremendous interest in classical arts. Whether it is tabla, whether it is singing, whether it is sitar, whether it is any other instrument, there was a passionate engagement with the traditional arts and culture. And no wonder, with your kind of family where everything was already there, you were entrenched into this. And happy that you mentioned about R.D. Burman's influence. Even during the childhood, you heard all kinds of music around you. You heard singing. So it must have been an unconscious journey where all this knowledge, the repository of knowledge, constantly seeped into your brain. And like you say, the Indian brain is, you know, it has its own ability to grasp anything. And anything that happens in your childhood stays till your final days. You know, it is so intense and it is so able to accept everything. And with this constant interaction with all these stalwarts, the leading stalwarts, you mentioned about Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, Ravi Shankar ji, Vilayat Khan Sahab. So all these people coming home, were there any humorous situation or anecdotes when some great person came and you as a child don't know what is great and what is not, and you mentioned about other, you have to touch their feet. So was there any funny incident or humorous situation? Think back.
Of course, when I grew up, I
Yeah.
felt bad that here was this carnival happening in the house of these great artists, I mean, and the who's who of that period. They're all like humongous artists, and I was so small that I could not take. I was watching it and watching TV in America, and this is the Alipur College in the 60s, which was like throbbing with the classical energy, and so many Western students, so many people learning Indian classical music, learning the Indian ways. You have to understand it was all coupled with Indian spirituality. There was Mahesh Jogi on one side, with Indian spirituality. Then there was the whole culture of the East was gradually seeping in. And Pandit Ravi Shankar ji, Ustad Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, they were the people who kind of took it there, Very important work they did. So for me, I think that's there. And I think the most funniest thing was that I remember I used to sing Yellow Submarine when I was a kid. That's the Beatles song. And my father used to want me to play something for them or do something. I wasn't in that. My headspace was not there. So I was just
Yeah.
get a little irritated. Chalo, tabla ka bol nahi padta yaar, Yellow Submarine ga do. So just sing. I used to sing, and they used to all press my cheeks, and I'm sure they used to think that, what is Shankar's son doing? He's singing Yellow Submarine. So he is a hota tha, he was all. But later on, much later, when the same Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, I debuted with Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, which was in 1990. My first big concert was with him. And then in 93, Ravi Shankar ji heard me in a house concert and asked me to play with him on stage in Brussels. And so later on, I spoke to them. I asked them, what was I like a child? I mean, I was this. So they were like, yeah, we didn't ever think that you're going to become a top tabla player, We thought you were going to be. So my father must have seen that those days. That's why he came back. He must have thought, music nahi hoga. So he came back to it. And then India opened up for me after about 6, 7, 8 months. The first culture shock gone. Then I realized the warmth of this country, the unbelievable variety, the cultural diversity, everything was so fantastic. There was no comparison. I mean, life in America was cushy and comfortable, but life here was throbbing. It was fantastic.
Now, having covered this journey of yours, you then shifted on to formal classical platforms, and you started accompanying the great stalwarts. Obviously, on the concert platform, on the stage, there was one person who was 50, 55, 60 plus, and there was this young boy trying to accompany, while the musicality could match, but the wisdom and the experience, which is based on the number of years, obviously couldn't match. So, did you feel a little, I don't want to call it a little low, but did you ever feel that maybe you're not measuring up?
Intimidated is the word.
Presence.
Of course I was. It was not even me being 25 and the other person being 55. I was 25 and Ravi Shankar ji was 75, 70, early 70s. So now you have to understand one thing. My father gave me a fantastic talim. And my learning was really so intense, and so much of information was imparted. Along with that, Pandit Shekhar's the whole understanding of Carnatic music. So the talim had been really solid. And when I started playing, early days, let us now go back to say 1986, 87. When I started playing concerts, I was playing with my contemporaries, Devashish Da, Tejendra Da, these people, we used to practice together for years and years from the early 80s, and then I was starting playing concerts. I remember one concert I had played with one of my contemporaries, and my father had gone to that concert. So I came back home after the concert. I got a lot of claps, so I thought I had played very well. I came back home. 2 days, he didn't say anything to me. To the point I was literally in tears. Then my mother went and told him, isko tarpa kyun rahe ho? Usko batao kya hai? You want to say something? So he called me. So he calls me and says, you played very good tabla yesterday. I said, thank you. He said, you play very good tabla. I said, what are you trying to say? He said, your tabla was fantastic, but your music was zero.
Oh my God. It's a very profound statement. It's a very profound statement. Yeah.
Yes. So he made me conscious of the aesthetics of the fact that you had to be in tandem with another musician, his musicianship or her musicianship, and interpret it on stage with the knowledge basis that you had, and then accompany. So that he made me conscious of that from much earlier. So much later, when I started playing with these great stalwarts, Pandit Ravishankarji in particular, he was a bit surprised how I had the maturity of an older person, you know, and he tell me that. He used to say, ki, how has Shankar taught you? Tell me some incidents. How has he taught you? What did he used to tell you? So I used to tell him all these things. I used to tell Raviji all of these things that, you know, Baba told me that, you know, you played very good tabla, you played zero music, you know. So he said, look, that is why you are able to understand it now, you know. So yes, as I say, you know, I've been very blessed and very lucky, because here all this information coming my way, my father playing with Pandit Ravishankar, I mean, who gets a chance to do that, seriously? I mean, for so many years, living with him, traveling with him, understanding what it takes to do everything, how you're supposed to behave with people, how you talk to people, the music, the spirituality of it, all of it. I'll give you another example of something Ravishankarji said to me. Beautiful. 1995, we were in Japan. We were in the sit-down dinner, very high-profile Japanese ambassadors, ministers and all. And they gave us a spread of food, which was primarily raw or semi-cooked. And I remember going to Japan with my father in '89 and not being able to eat anything because the food was raw. And so I just had some rice and some curries. In '95, Raviji is sitting next to me and he says to me, I know what you're feeling now. You've been a good Bengali boy for all these years. You've had your macha jhol bhat and rasgulla and mishti, doi and all of this. But here you are intimidated by the food because it's a completely different kind of form. But understand this is your chance to become an international citizen. Only if you are an international citizen can you understand or collaborate with other artists from across the globe, which is something he realized I wanted to do because he himself had done that so successfully. You know, so he said, if you don't understand their culture, you will never be able to collaborate with them successfully. The first step to understand another culture is to eat their food. You're putting it in your mouth. Immediately I took a piece of food and I put it in my mouth, and from then I've been a big avid Japanese food addict almost, you know. So these are the lessons I got, and these lessons were so profound, and these people had depth in them that I was able to grow quickly.
I must tell you this, in my experience of 50 years intense engagement with classical music, this is the first time somebody has told me that the route to good music is through food.
The first person was William Shakespeare. If music be the food of love, play on. I have a corollary to it. If food be the music of love, eat on.
So no wonder that you are an internationally successful name, not just for percussion, for so many other things, so many other aspects of good Indian classical music. And these kind of small changes in your life. You know, somebody asked me, what is it that the stalwarts teach you? The stalwarts teach you the small things. And when you absorb them, when you inculcate these values in your life, and then try to start building a facade on that, you're so successful because you have already known the fundamentals. So the fundamentals of good music are inculcated into you through these stalwarts. You know, after all, Guru Sishya Parampara was nothing more, nothing different from this. From the Guru, you are with him for 24 hours, and everything that the Guru did, you try to imitate, and that's how you realize how much wisdom is there in our music. It is not just the music. Like your father told you, you played excellent tabla, but where was the musicality? So, especially for today's youngsters, when you are watching them speaking, you are speaking today, they must realize that it is not just the mastery over the art. It is a question of mastery over your art to be combined with the mastery of some other art. So when that collaboration has to happen, that collaboration comes after a little wisdom. So it is not just a journey as in isolation, but a journey as a team.
Very true, Ganesh. You've actually completely, it's spot on what you just said. Because I think, it is life experience. Wisdom is life experience. So as you go on in life, you gain experience. So the question is, how much wisdom you gain is how open you are. Are all your antennas ready to receive? Is what actually eventually matters. And I was lucky that I had people around me, some wonderful people. I mean, and they were not just from the music world. There were other people in my education world. I had a Bengali teacher. He was amazing. The way he taught me philosophy, life lessons, wonderful. So I keep telling youngsters that, see, and you have to read also. You have to read. If you read, then you don't have to experience everything yourself. You can vicariously learn through other people's experience through reading. And these are the things that eventually enrich your music, because then the next step for me, when I became a composer, and I'm myself surprised because I've done some 200 albums, and I've scored for 45 feature films, and which all the feature film thing all happened post 44. So all of this has happened because of the wisdom. End of the day, all those lessons that were imbibed, seeing Pandit Ravi Shankar in action, he's composing Chants of India, I'm playing Chants of India, George Harrison is there, all these wonderful artists are there, everybody from Vishnu Mohanji to Ranuda to Tarunda, all his students and everybody sitting there. How is he composing? How is he creating energy, So 10 days in George Harrison's house in Henley-on-Thames, we're there, watching him in action. That is a masterclass for composition, How do you... so I just done a film called Avijatrik, which is an extension of the Apu trilogy. And I had to keep that trajectory going. So this is all coming from him.
Before we go on to your non-classical engagements, I want to spend a little chunk of time on trying to understand your thought process. There are two schools in the Indian classical music. One school says, keep your antenna on, receive good information from all over, try and inculcate it, and then reproduce it in your own way. There is another school which says, sorry, maintain your core values, don't listen to this and that riff-raff music, and that adulterates your music will become impure, so stay within your limits. So these are the two extreme schools of thoughts. But obviously you represent the first class where you are willing to take on everything. But how do you tell the youngsters which is more important? Is it important to maintain your identity with the core values, or is it also important to accept other things but in a limited measure and yet maintain your purity? How would you react to that?
Okay, so for me, I literally have to operate like a chameleon, because just yesterday myself and did a concert for the Ali Akbar G's centenary. So we are playing pure classical music. I have never in a pure classical music concert used any other instrument out of the realm of the tabla. Or kanjira or whatever. But when I'm playing classical music, never. It is always the traditional setup. I do not behave the way I behave in a fusion concert. I always wear a kurta pajama. I've never sat in a trouser and played. So you have to make an informed choice. When you are playing in a certain structure, why in a certain structure? When you're talking to your parent, for example, are you going to talk to your parent exactly like you talk to your friend? You have to understand what the structure is. And within that structure, you have to operate. Same for me. When I'm playing a classical concert, I'm very, very, very clear that I will play pure and purest classical music. When I'm playing fusion, then that is another Bickram. That person is another person. And I have the independence there because the format allows it of being somebody else. So it is an informed choice that how do I behave. You cannot do either or anything really without enough knowledge. First and foremost, that's why I said particularly that all of it began at 35. Imagine, I've been learning tabla from the age of 2. So all those years were spent in the purest format. And then to break free, I have to know how am I breaking free? Is there dignity in my breaking free or not? So the first thing people say is, oh, fusion is confusion, which is true. 90% of the time it is that. So how do you understand the aesthetics, the dignity and the value system of what you are bringing to the table as the parts of the classical format? At the end of the day, I'm still playing tabla. And how much can you allow yourself to move out because you want to draw people in? So people who are youngsters, college concerts, we get full houses. I would go there, then I stand and play. I have a standing setup of tabla. When I'm doing that, I still am never out of tal. We are still in raga, we are still in tal. Yes, we are allowing certain things to happen, which is acceptable in that format. So that informed decision has to be taken, and if you're not properly trained, you cannot take an informed decision.
Well, what happens is, since we run a reasonably large television channel which is seen all over the world,
of course,
these kind of issues always keep popping up because you have a large number of youngsters who take on to classical music. Somewhere after about 1 year, they lose interest in one. They take on to something else. Then they take on to something else. And as a result, they have ruined their entire career. And this happens to quite a few number of youngsters, possibly because there was no one to handhold them and tell them what is right and what is not right. So if I can understand you well, what you mean is, first, master your art, the fundamental art for which you are known. Get that completely under your charge, and having achieved that status, then you start, going somewhere else and try to experiment every day with a new kind of a color, a new kind of a, like you said, chameleon. You're wanting to wear a new color of shirt that day. I want to wear a new fragrance. So these kind of changes are possible, but fundamentally you need to be strong in one aspect, whether it is a melody or the percussion. You mentioned about learning tabla and the mridangam from your Shekharji, but I have never seen you playing mridangam. No. Though you may have learned it, though you might have mastered the or whatever, but basically you have constrained yourself to be a tablaist. And while you are there, why you do something else?
I'll just throw in a point there. I have never played the mridangam, but from the early 90s, I have played a tabla which I call the Carnatic tabla, which is a big low sa tabla. You will always see it in my performances, which is a low, which yeah, pagadi is bigger. So it is almost like a mridangam. It's a cross between a tabla, a pakhawaj and a mridangam. So I play Carnatic style, which is why often you will see me playing korbais and stuff on that tabla in a Hindustani concert also sometimes, because people like Guruji, Ravi Shankar ji, they incorporated certain elements like certain ragas, kirmani, vagara, certain tala incorporated into the North Indian system from Carnatic style. So I also did this particular tabla. I never played a mridangam for the simple reason that it may affect my finger technique.
Of course. Yeah, I actually wanted to say, because while the bowl or the chollukattu, one can easily master, but your fingering techniques are very different. And once you start confusing your fingers, they don't know what instruction to follow.
Exactly. So brain is confused. So that is why I avoided that, but I imitated the sound on the Carnatic tabla. I called it, I named it, and my first recorded piece was in 1993, which I recorded in an album called Talking Tabla. I recorded a piece called Carnatic tabla, which was pure, somebody was keeping Adital and I was playing korvais and the information from. So that's how.
So it enlarges your repertoire. While you have maintained the basic values, but by trying to assimilate other things, you try and expand your canvas on which you paint. And I want to ask you one more thing. The baya, as it is handled in Hindustani tabla, and the topi, as it is handled in the Carnatic, which one you think is more evolved in terms of producing different kind of sound elements? What is your experience?
Okay, so I have a very interesting theory for this. The baya has a greater as, means a larger resonance. When you touch the baya, it goes gum, and it stays for a longer time.
Stays.
The left hand of the mridangam has a less resonance. It goes dup, Duk.
That's it.
It's more
Yes.
difficult to get a gumki out of it than from baya.
True.
Interestingly, if you look at all cultures, if you follow the left hand drum of the main drum of that culture, you will find a similarity with their language, and you will see even a certain value system emerging from it. I'll make it clear. So, in Mridangam, because there is less as, the entire modus shifted towards a mathematical, precision-based, information. And here in the north, because of the as of the baya, because it has so much resonance, it went the lyrical way. So you have dhad, dhad, dhumuk, gadid, nad, kat, dhan, dhan. So you see, dhaane, dhaane. We are incorporating the as into the bowl, into the konakol. But there it's tadum, ketadum, takadum. So it's all staccato. Because the drum it doesn't allow the as. And hence, the entire kind of structure built around this this theory of tal in that system and in this system completely different. So we are looking. Sometimes we play certain chakardars or certain compositions which the Carnatic musicians say this is incorrect because it is not mathematically precise. But here the composer was not even thinking of the mathematical precision. He was thinking. So he is thinking lyrically, and here they are precision. So I think it's very, very important, if possible, if the percussionists can have a taste of both the cultures, then they have this, they learn the precision from the South Indian structure, and they get some of the lyricism from the North Indian structure. And then it becomes really interesting how you, and a lot of artists have done that. A lot of the tabla players, including people like Zakir Bhai, and they've taken from the South, and vice versa. Some of the younger mridanga players today they play amazing gumki. They have the thumb technique, they use the thumb, and they do some amazing. So that's kind of tabla driven.
Yesterday was Umayalpuram Shivaraman sir's birthday. So I spoke to him exhaustively in the morning. And we were generally discussing the differences between Mridangam and Tabla and Pakawaj. And what you say is extremely right. Shivaraman sir is a mathematical genius. The permutation combination that he works out in presenting his art, and especially the chapel, which is very, very typical and unique to the Mridangam playing, is something that's really great. It engages your intellect. But I feel personally, while the Carnatic Mridangam engages your intellect, the Hindustani tabla, because of that gaiki ang or the melodic ang or that sustained value, it engages your heart, and you are quite tempted to say wah.
Yeah.
So it's nothing but a combination of different kinds of beauties. Now, for example, if you notice Patri Satish Kumar Gumki playing, like you rightly say, he uses this portion of the hand. And he is able to, do wonders. Now, I
was actually thinking of Patri when I said that, because Patri and I are playing together on 31st December in Chennai, and we'll be playing together. And I've noticed him doing that in some videos. And there was another great Mridangam Vidwan, Guruvayur Doraiji. Guruvayur Dorai had a very unique gumki. I played with him also. Several concerts we played. Like Kadri Gopalnath ji, me and Guruvayur ji, we played. So I saw that they were kind of using a bit of a smattering of tabla baya technique, on the. So that's fantastic because and see the modulatory left is always, it's like language. So if I say to you, if I met you, when you said, you gave me a lovely introduction, and to that introduction, if I retorted in exchange that, Ganesh ji, it's very nice to see you. I've really enjoyed hearing what you said, and thank you so much. Oh, Ganesh, it's so nice to meet you, and this is wonderful, and I really enjoyed talking to you. With all this gumki, with all this modulation, your expression becomes warmer. It touches the heart immediately. So that's what the left hand is there for. And I really feel the more you work on the body, the more the heart, even through percussion.
See, unlike in Mridangam, the skin is very thick. Unlike in tabla, where you have a lot of scope to go a little more into the gunki aspect. But Mridangam has very, limitations on that aspect. But it kind of more than matches this on the other side with the mathematical rendering on the other side.
I have been fascinated, still continue to be so for the last 35 years now. And it's unfathomable, the depth of the... See, sometimes you make the mistake of thinking that math is not beauty. Math is beauty. It's incredible beauty. The entire universe is set to math. That is why it is beautiful. Imagine coming back every 75 years. उसको दिमाग में क्या गया कि यार तू वापस 75 साल में आओ. He is not coming back in 100 years, 150 years. Every 75 years, so everything, every day, every night is a math. 24-hour day, 12 months a year, all math. There is huge beauty in math. And when you see that dramatic compositions, oh my God, the symmetry is godlike.
Now, I want to take on two more questions on the technicalities because you are an expert and an evolved musician. So I want the youngsters to take advantage of that. The concept of Upapakavadyam, which is very prevalent in the South, maybe because, like you said, the gunki possibility is very limited on the Mridangam, but the Kanjira, takes care of that. When it is Kanjira, you mentioned about Harishankarji. So, sorry, you went out of audio. Yeah.
Take that for me, the meaning of Upapakavadyam.
Pakavadyam is an instrument. Pakkavadyam is a supporting instrument. The Upapakavadyam is a support to the supporting instrument.
Okay.
So you have a singer and then the Mridangam, which is the Pakkavadyam. Suppose the center is a Veena. So that is the Vadyam. The Pakkavadyam is the Mridangam. And yes, the Upapakavadyam is a support to the Mridangam. So in the Tani, in the cycle of Taniyavartanam, what happens is the gunki thing is more or less more profoundly expressed by the Kanjira. Where you have this, you press it and you keep on creating all those fine notes. And so this concept of Pakkavadyam and Upapakavadyam, to the best of my knowledge, does not exist in Hindustani. Point number one. Point number two, in Carnatic renderings, you have, while the main musician expresses all his creative abilities, the Pakkavadyams are expected to kind of follow him like a faithful friend or a wife or whatever. But they get a time when they express all that is within. You mentioned about Guruvayur Durai. Yeah. When he enters the Tani space, oh my God, he finishes everyone else around him. So that limited time where the percussionist is allowed a separate time and where he establishes all his creative abilities is also missing in Hindustani, where you tend to almost, do that small solo piece in every number. Whereas in Carnatic music, it doesn't happen that way. So one is the concept of Upapakavadyam. Second is the concept of this Tani. Third, and the far more important in my perspective, in Carnatic music, when the Tani is played, they use a concept called Korapu. That is, they take a phrase, then keep on reducing the meter, and this is called Korapu. Whereas in Hindustani, you have exactly the opposite. You call it a Badath, where you keep on expanding the phrase. So I think, it's a very, intellectually, it's a very challenging kind of an exchange between North and South, and not so much in vocal music. But when it comes to percussion music, it's so profound. Each has its own great strengths. And when there is an element of exchange between them, it really is very impressive. So what are your opinions on Upapakavadyam, the Tani, and the Korapu and the Bharat?
Okay, so of the aesthetics of each of these instruments, like so, because I've been exposed to them so much, Mridangam, Kanjira, Ghatam, even the Morsing. So now I play tabla accompany, say, with other artists, sitar, sarod, primarily the instrumental artists, I almost always use my Carnatic tabla, which is a lower octave. I have the higher octave tabla, which is set to whatever, D, D sharp, C sharp, whatever. There's the baya. Because we don't have these other instruments, Upapakavadyams, I try to embellish music by playing all those roles myself.
Okay. Okay.
So, just like yesterday or any day, an interesting, last year, Dovalin, I played with Shashank and this one, Sanjeev Abhyankar. They had a duet. And it was just me on tabla. So what I did was, I used the losa, the mridanga, for Shashank, and the high for Sanjeev. Throughout the concert, I was trying to embellish Sanjeev more with the baya. And his gaiki was the support of the baya, and there was a nice jhol being created, which was like almost like you're on a sweep.
Yeah.
And where with Shashank, there was a certain percussiveness that was going on, and that was working really well with the Carnatic tabla. So I am conscious of the fact that in the Hindustani setup, you don't have those frequencies, which the Ganjira or a Ghatam will bring. So I try to embellish it in that way. Now, on the other hand, there is what I feel that beautiful about Hindustan. The tabla, as my father had told me, you played very good tabla, what happened to the music? The tendency of the percussionist is often to replicate his or her talim. I have learned this composition, I have learned this korvai, I have learned this mathematical progression. Let me repeat on stage. But in the moment, if the sitar vadak played something, I can in the moment and not react with something I have learned. I don't have to go back to my quiver of arrows and pick one to answer. I can do it through creativity in the moment, because I have the flexibility of all these realms in my knowledge base. So I immediately react and I try to play something that is not even in a composition. It can be an improvisation with strokes and modulation.
On the spot.
Yeah. So that is something which is wonderful, and Hindustani classical music allows a lot of that. And that improvisational space. So I really, it's my personal opinion, because I went through the process. I do wish that every tabla player gets a bit of Mridangam Talim or a bit of Carnatic Talim, and vice versa, because there are traditions which are not existing in the other tradition, and you should try and take and use it not by creating a cocktail, but use it in an informed, intelligent manner. Yes, so you can embellish the music further. There is no end to bettering something. There's no end to it. So if we try to do that, you do get an advantage. And that really worked in this Dobalin concert that we did. It was really wonderful to see how people were reacting, because I was playing two completely different energies. And I think that really is wonderful. Okay, coming to the reduction and the progression, which you mentioned as your third point. See, the Barhat, again, it can be it can be learnt. People play a qaida, you do Barhat, that is also preconceived. It is learnt. Variation 1, 2, variation 3, you can keep doing all of that. But what is interesting is that if you are suddenly you want to do a reduction, which might, because some of the compositions in the Carnatic system which have reductions, if the person has played something that is relevant, I suddenly take from that and I throw it into the mix. So then what happens is you are using both the idioms, because they are there at your disposal. You can use whatever you want. It's just we are always scared, I think personally, and then there's an ego. The ego is this, that I am of my realm. But if your headspace is, I am just a student, I want to learn more and more. And if I learn, I want to use it also in different ways. The judge will be the audience. Is this done in an aesthetically pleasing way? Is this done in a compromised way? That is the eventuality of it is that. There is no right or wrong in music. How can there be right or wrong? There's no right or wrong. The same music in one circumstance, you may say it is right, and in another circumstance, you may say it is wrong. That's not right. Because you have to find, aesthetic is that exists. But morality doesn't exist in music. Aesthetic correctness or incorrectness exists. It cannot be that is wrong. You must never do that. No. It can be wrong if you are playing a tihai or a korwai which doesn't come on the sum. That is wrong. But that you can't say that this combining this, taking this from, I play Farrukhabad Gharana, but I play so much of Banaras. In my Baj, I've taken so much from Banaras. I love it. Then some people have criticized me for it and said he's not playing pure Farrukhabad. I can play pure Farrukhabad, but I'm choosing not to and taking something that I like. So please allow me.
So, see, bringing in beautiful embellishments to music is a constant. It's a given. So if you play what you have been playing for years together, well, there is nothing new to take home. So when you beautify that with a little element of here and there, it is something, like you rightly say, it is for the audience to decide. It is not for the...
See, one thing I find is often compromised in a classical concert, which in any idiom of classical, it is compromised often, and that should not be the case, because we need more and more people to listen to our music, and especially youngsters, the next generation. They do not necessarily come with a knowledge base. They do not come with, oh, I know this raga, this is a beautiful embellishment of that note. I know this tala. No, they're coming for an experience.
But with an open mind.
Yes.
Open mind.
Only thing that works is chemistry. If you go to see a film, you want to see the chemistry between the hero and the villain, the hero and the heroine. Everything is a yang. You have to have these elements in a concert. I remember watching concerts as a child of my father with Ali Akbar Khan Sahab, with Kishan Maharaj ji, with Pandit Ravishankar ji, with Vilat Khan Sahab, with some other great tabla player. The chemistry was palpable. These two sitting and playing with each other, it is a veritable, like electric, magnetic waves coming your way, The minute Vilat Khan Sahab, Ravishankar ji stops, Kishan Maharaj ji starts playing. Arey baapre, I'm getting goosebumps, right? Thinking of those moments, This somehow is often lost because of a certain sense of hierarchy. If the younger guy, like you asked me right in the beginning, so you're 25 and here is somebody who is 55, I must have the courage, and the older artist must also have the openness of mind to allow this chemistry to build between him and the other person, If that happens, the people, the janta who come to listen to the concert, they take home just the chemistry. They take, this moment, my God, the tabla player did that, and then the sitar player, they came together. How did they do that? This is what they're looking for. They're not looking for a studied performance which doesn't have those moments of chemistry. They need to see some risk factor. We need to be making those very risky moments in a concert. Ki utha liya abhi aayega ki nahi pata nahi hai. Karte hain, chalo ha. That is often missed because a lot of the artists come with the tabla players. They practice at home and there is a certain equation there that is replicated on stage. The same thing. So there's no excitement there. पहले ज़माने में क्या होता था? The sitar player is coming from Calcutta, tabla players from Lucknow. They've never even met. I have seen my father play in Patna with Roshan Kumari the great dancer. They never had met. Never met. Played straight on stage. What a concert, my goodness. So this excitement has to be retained in Indian classical music in both the genres, Carnatic and North Indian.
Very true. In fact, the performing artists need to be a little complete so that such on the stage challenges can be accepted and can also be given back. It is not the idea to expose somebody, but it is an idea to bring out the beauty of the other side. And when that kind of a constant exchange intellectually, melodically, when all these things happen, you have a very well-rounded concert, and the audience go back, with a lot of good feel that today, we heard something very, very unique. Now, having handled the technicalities, now, if I may shift to your most interesting phase as a musician, which is the non-classical initiatives that you have taken and successfully executed. I was reading an article which I don't know who has written, but this virtually simulated tones, where there is an intention today to kind of copy everything and make everything electronic. But you have stayed from that temptation and brought real, genuine music. And on that, Bickramji, I want you to speak quite exhaustively. Tell the audience, why is it important? While copying is easier because it doesn't cost you much intelligence, you can quickly within the gadgets, you can produce that. But there is a depth, there is a substance in the real instrument usage. So please tell us about that.
Ganeshji, I have to say this at this point that you and I have never had a really long conversation ever. We are having it first time on a public platform, but you are speaking completely my language. I don't know how this is happening, but here's chemistry happening right here. And you've hit the nail on the head. The VSTs. You have to use a certain amount of VSTs, which are virtually simulated tones, which you trigger from the keyboard. Actually, the keyboard is just the medium of playing it, but there is a software which is giving you, say you want to play the guitar, you have the guitar there, you play it on the keyboard. You can play ghatam, whatever, everything is available, you can play it on the keyboard. What is important is the VSTs, because they are created in a very perfect, almost like in a vacuum. There is almost no room noise. There's a tremendous pressure. The tonal pressure is very strong. In many cases, it is not as strong in the same thing being played from a live instrument. So now my quandary was that when I started doing it, I come from a very idealistic background. Classical music is an idealistic background. Everybody is in their headspace. They're like, oh, this is the Garden of Eden, literally. This is the beauty of music. So for me, it was very difficult to say. So I remember a film I did in Bangla, which became a humongous hit called Ebar Shogol. Arindam Seal directed it. They wanted a pure electronic score because this was internet. It was chase sequences, a lot of people murder, this, that. They didn't want sarod, sitar, which I use normally. It was huge. I wanted to enter the market also. I wanted to do this job and do it in my way. So I chose an electric sitar. A lot of people play now, and there's a young man here, Abhishek Malik, he plays the electric sitar. We used the electric sitar. Behind it, we used VSTs. We used the VSTs were basically loops of rhythm. So some sounds going on. But what I always do, and I continue to do in every single film, my VST never left alone as a VST. It is always covered with a live sound. So if I that particular loop, on top of it, there was a big chase sequence, I simply used the baya. No tabla. Throughout I used the VST modulatory note. Wow. People were saying, what was that sound? We've never heard that sound before. It was not one sound. There were at least three there. One from the VST, one from the baya, and then I also a bit of kanjira, just to give it a nice little edge on towards the end of it, a little gumki, because it's different. The baya gumki, kanjira gumki are different. When you are getting into this space where you're creating tones and sounds which are faithful to the original instrument, because you're using the original instrument, but you're using the punch of the VST, because the VST, and there is a certain, like, kicks and really low end sounds you don't get. Classical music, Indian classical music, does not have an equivalent of a bass guitar.
True. Very true.
I have to find something which gives me that frequency. Otherwise, a whole generation has come who are used to that frequency, you know. And then, so I often use my hand sonic, which has an SH101 bass guitar tone, which I use even in shows. It gives a fantastic low end, you know. The minute people are, oh my God, what was that, you know. But then I'm faithfully playing the baya, moving from here to there, and which is what I also do in the films. But I am on a more, I am on this, my life is, I have been born, I believe, to use Indian classical music in every possible way. This is what I was born to do, because I am so much in love with Indian classical music. There is no film that I have done which doesn't have an Indian classical instrument playing. Be it a hoodet, be it whatever. Sitar sarod ghusega usme. And today, especially in Bangla, I've done Hindi a fair bit. Jal, I remember, where Sonu Nigam and I did the music for it together, 2015. We got an Oscar contention for that. And the music was, again, people didn't even understand. There were smatterings of sitar, of sarod in certain sequences, which were used in such a way which is not traditional, but I'm using the frequencies. So I just use in Hikari. A little bit of the harmony strings, the what do you call, the supporting strings I use, and create an atmosphere. Uske upar you're using a frame drum. So for me, I have to have my classical instruments everywhere, because I don't think there is an possible of replication of these instruments. These instruments are divine. You have so much in tabla, you have VST, so many things, you know. You cannot do the baya. You can't even, you can't do the nuances. A live instrument being played, a live human being interpreting it. Imagine that you can get something better than that through something that is virtually simulated. I don't think it's possible. A lot of people are doing it, but I hear it and nothing happens to me when I hear it. My heart is not charged and I don't feel anything, you know. But the minute somebody is playing a cello, beautiful cello comes in and violin comes. See, the modulation, at the end of the day, is the modulation. People are simulating the modulation in VSTs also with a pedal or something, you know. It doesn't happen, because the modulation is you, the person. It is how you say to somebody, I love you. It is how you say, Ma. It is how you say, beta, beta, kitna aa hai usme, aas hai. So these are the things that these Indian instruments, because they're such intimate instruments and always played in solo formats. You don't hear a Vrindavadan of Sarod. I mean, of course, there's been a Mayhar band and this, but primarily we are not an orchestra. We are an individual instrument communicating with a large audience. That beauty, I want to capture it in cinema, in my fusion work, and that's what I do. And I think I found a voice there, which is why I did another film last year, Sanjay Dutt's film Torbaz, which is on Netflix, and that was very challenging because they wanted, it's set in Afghanistan, and the option was very simple. I could have done it through electronic sounds. A lot of people, I went and found out an oud player. I said, I want a bazooki player, I want a sanj player. Usko un logo ko studio mein laya. Then each person, the music, just, I got the best background for that, because it just opened up. These human beings brought such energy into the studio. The film is coming alive because of the instruments. So I think we really have to think as composers that we need to bring live sound back, and in a much bigger way. And if the sound is Indian, then I am happy. If it is sitar, sarod, and Indian instruments. That's my roots. You can say I'm biased, but yeah, I'm biased.
In fact, I must compliment you. If there is one single largest to take from this chat, if I may phrase it slightly differently, the Indian instruments are filled with life. Indian instruments are filled with energy. Indian instruments are filled with pathos, but they are islands of excellence. But
Beautiful.
when you want to produce an orchestra oriented kind of a thing, you need to use them intelligently because, like you rightly said, there are all different frequencies. Now,
Yes.
if these frequencies are intelligently mixed, then you have the right effect. Otherwise, it may become a little jarring.
Yeah.
So, when you produce a score, you have to use these life-filled instruments, but in a manner which can address a new kind of an audience.
Yes.
And it has to act as a, yeah. So if it has to, if there has to be a bridge between the two, the islands of excellence and as a teamwork of so many instruments. I was stunned once sometime back I run the Indian Musicological Society, which is 56-year-old, and we published a lot of journals on Indian classical music and all that. And somebody asked me, do you have a pitch chart for Indian music? And I searched all over and I was stunned. The country where music is born, we don't have a pitch chart. So if you are addressing 8 octaves, which a human ear can perceive, now nobody has plotted these 8 instruments in those 8 octaves. So you don't know what a surbahar did, you don't know what a sitar did, you don't know what the South Indian Venu did. So this plotting of instruments between these 8 octaves itself was non-existent. So it shows that while we are excellent in music, we are wanting a little on the musicology.
Very true. Very true.
Because my request to you is your journey of taking the real sounds and offering it on a platter to a new kind of an audience
Yeah.
is something that every Indian musician should strive for, because there is a need today to create the younger audience base around you. And if they are going to like, different frequencies, so what? We offer them what they want. There is absolutely nothing wrong. Rather than telling them that you should like what I will create, it is better to say, oh, you want this, I create what you would like. And this getting back into the fold the youngsters into rich Indian tradition and retain them into our own system of culture and the sanctity or the purity or what have you. So if you're going to have a stressful journey into that by trying to take the Indian instruments and presenting it in a new form, I'm sure very soon you are not only going to be a national name, you are going to become an international name. I'm looking at future engagements for you, because there are very few people who can do this intelligently. People may play good music, people may play good instruments, but this concept of merging them into a single track and presenting at a background score to something else is a very challenging task. And if you have done it, Bickram, give my compliments to you.
Thank you, sir. See, I think at this point where I am in life right now, in my mid-50s, I am looking at it all holistically. It's one, and there are characters, of course, in this play, different characters, but it is one single drama. It is music. It's this one single drama where there are different characters, and if you stop like that and you stop judging it too much, then it opens up for you. And the youth like adventure, and they like adventurer. So if I am going there to them, and that's what I did with my first album 20 years, more than 20 years back now. I just went to them with a form of music which addressed the frequencies they were looking for. So I had the really those going, and yet I had all these Indian melodies, Kirwani, Charukeshi, Banjara, all these beautiful rags, and nice grooves. So I broke the concept of tal in rhythmscape. I broke it into capsules of grooves. Wow. So if you count, there's nothing but the groove after groove. So people understand a groove. They don't often get a tal, because a tal is too intellectual a space for them to wrap their brain around it. Okay, अरे बाप रे, अभी 16 beats, उसमें वो भी विलंबित 3 ताल, they find it difficult. But you break it down into grooves, then it is easy for them. So you have to do this work. People have to do this work. Otherwise, you cannot attract them. Once they are into your realm and they become your fans, then they want to come. Sir, what is Tintal? You played Tintal. What is Tintal? Then you have a chance to tell them this is this, But you have to bring them to the fray first.
No, I must compliment you, Bikramji, for this excellent journey, because foot tapping music is very basic, very pedestrian, but it is an important stage for the uninitiated to enter your musical realm.
Yes.
So somebody needs to play that role of getting the outside into your inside. Somebody needs to address these issues. So I'm extremely happy that here is a, yeah.
If you have a rhythm going, a nice rhythm, which is say on a drum beat, something which they identify with, you layer a tabla over it or a mridangam over it, which I've done very often, and then you create a nice melody in a beautiful raga. You have a charukeshi, a melody going. You see, you have kind of tricked them into this space where they are comfortable, because they hear the groove going, the beat going, and they say, oh, I know that. That's like so-and-so, what I've heard. But then they haven't heard the beauty of charukeshi. They haven't heard the beauty of tabla. And then they're curious. Oh my God, that really got me. I was dancing. But those other sounds, what were they?
It was like those olden days, दादी को आपको कैस्टर ऑयल पिलाना है, लेकिन बुलाएंगे तो वो तो आप तो नहीं आएंगे. बेटा मिठाई खा दो, तो मिठाई खाया, ये दिया वो दिया, सडनली कैस्टर ऑयल दे दिया और वो भी अंदर चला गया. तो यही बात है. So our music, no, I think we need to have this fun elements, this fun aspect of enjoying our music. And I'm extremely happy that an evolved musician wants to try out this experiment and get the outside crowd into all the thing. So that brings us to almost the culmination of our chat today, Bickramji. Now, my request to you would be, in whichever way you think you can associate with the InSync TV channel, because we have today a huge world looking at us day in and day out, 24/7. 30 million is a big number. So here is a number that we have generated. And through this platform, good music can be offered to people. And if you think there is some intelligent way to look at giving that, you're most welcome to provide us whatever content that you think is relevant, and we'll be happy to carry them. And you can constantly tell us what is the right way to move ahead. And as a channel, I don't think it belongs to a certain set of people. It belongs to all of us. It belongs to the entire classical music fraternity. So with that, so many people have posted their opinions. Yeah. So many people have posted their comments during the chat. My thanks to all of them. And maybe we will also post this chat on the YouTube channel later, so that people can also watch back in leisure. So Bikramji, once again, thank you very much. If you have some final concluding statement, please go ahead.
Thank you, Pichi. That was lovely, really, really in depth, and the questions you asked obviously is coming from an informed mind. And InSync is doing wonderful work. We all know about InSync. I'm more than happy to provide content, because this is, as I said, our life journeys are in sync. So there is no reason not to, So I would be more than happy to do whatever you'd like to do. And to you as well, please continue this good work, because I know how much it takes. This is a morcha. This is something you have to be really impassioned about, to do it day in, day out for years and years and years. And yes, the world needs to know the beauty and the greatness of our music, our classical music primarily, and all our music is based on it. It's all coming from that fountain. So yes, our journeys are in sync, and let us continue to do this. And thank you very much for having me on the show. To all those who came and all these wonderful comments that are coming in, thank you so much. Lots of love and lots of music. Let's hope music shines in this world.
Thank you very much, Bickram Ghosh. Wish you a very good day. All the best.
Thank you.